My name's Kel Heyl, and I'm doing a series on the forum called Pushback Storytelling. On the next edition, I'll be pushing back with Village Financial Cooperative. Can money be transformed from legal tender to a lever for moving the world? Find out how you can take your money out of a bank too big to fail and put it in a right-sized for your community credit union. My right hand represents some discouraging piece of news. My left hand is my sadness. The sound is the dialectic. The sting is the need to push back. Consuming standard issue news is like any other form of consumption. Momentary satiety followed by mindless avoidance of all waste produced. Satiety, never clarity. Consuming news is to stay manacled on a decaying carousel in a toxic fog. It's only by pushing back do we gain clarity. Pushing back is the only way to disperse the fog, stop the carousel, and transform it to David's sling. This is the third in a series of shows called Pushback Storytelling. Start by identifying a current political or economic phenomenon, and then talk with a guest doing exactly the opposite and having success. The guest is negating the status quo. It's called storytelling to emphasize the personal, the local. Most of us can't affect national or international politics or macroeconomics, but we can meet with city council members or our county commissioners or legislators, and day to day, we can vote with our dollars. Pushback storytelling aims to provide a toolkit to those watching on how they can help bend the arc of history towards justice. Cooperatives are the only business structure that honors democracy. All others are in service to the entrepreneur king. Capitalistic business works on the principle, one owner, all the votes. A cooperative business works on the principle, one member, one vote. Today, I want to push back just a bit on too big to fail, subprime loans, and redlining. What do you do when you discover you're living in a financial desert? Do you sigh and label it God's will? Or do you start your own financial co-op and transform the desert into an oasis? My guest today is Shiranthi Goonathilaka. One of Shiranthi's roles these days is as the lead of engagement and experience at Village Financial Cooperative in North Minneapolis. She attended Spelman and has a work history of aligning volunteers at nonprofits with the organization's visions and keeping a good pace on the trek fulfilling the mission. I'm wondering if we could start with you sharing a bit of the history of Village Trust. What drew the founders together?
Yeah, so anyone that lives in the Twin Cities will remember July 2016 when Philando Castile was murdered by police. And it was at that time that Malia Connolly, who was working at a local Black liberation grassroots organization, Neighborhoods Organizing for Change, she simply called a meeting of community folks. And so you'll remember that this is also during the time that the governor's mansion occupation was also happening. And so the reason for the meeting was that as she heard that another Black man had just been killed by police, just not 6 months before Jamar Clark, or after Jamar Clark, the question became, how can Black organizers, young Black folks that were holding down the 4th Precinct occupation that she knew would also be like on the front lines of this next occupation at the governor's mansion, what were other strategies that Black folks could use so we wouldn't have to physically put our bodies on the line when it came to insulating and defending communities. And so she held a meeting in a very small room on the north side of Minneapolis, around 200 folks, predominantly Black folks, predominantly Northsiders. And people shared under this umbrella of economic resistance what were tools, strategies, programs, initiatives that folks wanted to see to insulate our communities against police-sanctioned violence. So like really broad.
Would you say that the announced agenda was talking about more economic rather than, say, political?
I would say that it was more of a mix. And so one thing that I love to tell folks about the Twin Cities and remind folks is that we have a very long organizing history here, right? So when you think of all the work that various organizations, grassroots organizations do around base building, community, political education, there's already a lot of knowledge around police-sanctioned violence and where the connection is economically. And so I don't think that it's surprising that our communities were able to make that connection and say, we need to figure out under economics, like what is the thing that we actually want to invest in. And so that meeting had all around the room big pieces of paper, and people wrote down their ideas and then went back around and voted. And so the one with the biggest votes was a Black-led financial institution. So at that time, it wasn't a credit union, it wasn't a bank, it was just a Black-led financial institution. And so we took that charge, and that's where Village Financial comes from.
And so people are dutifully making suggestions on a large piece of paper.
Yep.
How long did it take to evolve into saying this is going to be a financial cooperative?
Yeah, definitely. I think one thing that's really cool about this is it's been very grassroots from the beginning, right? And so after a Black-led financial institution was the thing that had the most votes, Malia really took the time to figure out what within that large umbrella could it be. The Twin Cities actually has a really great history with Black-led credit unions here from the 1920s to the 1990s. So this also isn't a new strategy that Black folks have been using really around pooling community resources and being able to offer a different type of financial access. There's a lot of history at the Minnesota Historical Society.
Okay.
That's actually an interesting story. It was initially started by a group of young folks that wanted to have a social club, and then they opened up a food co-op, and then they opened up a credit union. And so it really built on the legacy of young people and developed as community needs developed. And so in the 90s, in a similar sense, there's a lot of community leaders that are still around today that were actually the founding members starting that. And so they've been very helpful as well of giving us feedback on things that they would have done differently.
And also it just creates a sense of continuity.
Yeah.
Through the history. Can you give me any feeling, so as she was doing her research,
Yeah.
I mean, there were a number of different possibilities. I mean, it could be a cooperative, it could be a credit union, it could be a bank.
Yep.
What helped solidify this particular, we're going to move in this direction?
Yeah,
And can you give me a feeling for the difference between those?
Definitely. So one of the things that's really special around credit unions is that there's one member and one vote. And so the difference between credit unions and banks is that with banks, we could all be collectively pooling our money into these accounts, but it's more of a vertical motion with our money. So that means if the bank makes a profit, the profits would go up to the shareholders, right, who initially were putting the money in to the entity. With cooperatives, when you put in money and we're all putting in money, you become a member owner. And so that means that you not only vote for our leadership, so our board would be voted for by folks that are members of the credit union, as well as really being able to access a different type of services. So credit unions a lot are known for having like lower interest rates, being a lot more hospitable, and doing some more community development work. And so when we think about what would make sense to address the systematic disparities with Black folks, especially on the North Side, and we're coming from Black liberation organizing, and also not necessarily identifying with capitalism and understanding all the problems within it, not wanting to create another structure that replicates the same systems of oppression was very important to us. And so when we looked more deeply at credit unions, really being able to have that membership engagement and ownership, but then also being able to creatively tailor our products and services to the needs of the communities that we'll be serving, it was a pretty no-brainer from that point. And having the history of Black-led credit unions in the Twin Cities is definitely building off of their legacy as well.
I'm wondering if you, one of the things that fascinates me being elderly is I'm fascinated with all the new titles in the workplace.
Yeah.
And I have certainly seen engagement in people's titles, and I have seen experience, the chief experience officer of an organization. But I'm wondering if you could tell me a little bit about what the lead of engagement and experience does.
Yeah, and so we've actually been fiddling with our titles a little bit. So before I was the director, and now I'm the lead. So we're wanting to really hone in on the fact that a lot of times titles gives an impression of what someone does or doesn't do, or the amount of power they have in the organization. Being cooperators ourselves, we really wanted to take away the director aspect of it and put lead so that it's more around how each individual shapes their work area. So engagement is your traditional membership engagement, the communication side, the marketing side, branding, things of that nature. And then the member experience part is really around how our members engage with the project. And so whether that's how they engage online and the type of information that they're getting on our social media, or how they engage when they walk into our building, and then the feelings that arise. Because one of the things that we're very cognizant of when it comes to financial institutions and Black folks is that there's a lot of trauma between that relationship. Black folks and any large institution, right? Healthcare, education, policing. And so we know that when you go into a financial institution, right now, whether it's a credit union or a bank, I would say, there is this tense feeling that folks might get, right? Because a lot of the times, the way banks are set up, especially in this day and age, you're probably going in there for some type of transaction to be made. So you have I need this, can you give it to me, right? Is the relationship that you have with this institution. And a lot of the times when it comes down to whether you need a small dollar loan or you need a line of credit, you need to simply open an account, there can be a lot of trauma around the aspect of denial or the potential of denial. And so what we want to do is make understanding that from a creation of products and services, step even further back and think of what does it look like for our members to walk into a space and what do they feel? What are some of the things that we should be doing with our guest experience to make sure that they actually feel like this is their credit union? Because as members of the credit union, you actually all collectively own the space. So that's a different type of relationship than when you're walking into an institution where you're just there for the transaction, right? So
one of the things that interests me is my industry is construction.
Okay.
And what intrigues me about your title is your old title, director, would be somebody wearing a suit who walks on a job site only in a hard hat for a photo op. Whereas a lead, like a lead carpenter, is somebody who's wearing a tool belt and physically doing the work.
Definitely.
So I'm intrigued with if a lot of old titles created sight lines like this. By changing the titles, now the eyes become aligned.
Definitely.
And so there's a more profound connection. Thinking about banks for a second, they have the Community Reinvestment Act, which is supposed to, I won't say, compel, encourage reinvestment in the community, giving back. One of the Rochdale principles of cooperatives is concern for the community. So how will Village Financial make its concern for the community tangible?
Yeah, definitely. I think that's a great question. There's a lot around this idea of even community development financial institutions, and there being a distinction between a regular financial institution and a community development one, right? Like there's supposed to be this air of we're really working with community to provide a service. And I think part of Village's informal theory of change is that part of our creation of products and services is a lot around our membership engagement. And so we actually just finished a beta around a product that we call the New Day Loan. And so this was a small dollar loan product up to $500, 0 to 6 months, 0 to 8% interest. And so what we ended up doing was we took the traditional payday loans that a lot of folks use, and also even the one, there's so many, like the Unbank, Pawn America, right? These services that pop up in communities that don't have access to traditional financial products and services. And for whatever reason, folks are deciding to go to these non-traditional spaces.
Some of the furloughed federal workers, I understand,
Yeah, definitely.
did business with those folks.
Yeah, and when you think about you have a need for access to balance your cash flow, right? Like whether you're not making enough money, there's a whole conversation around like a livable wage, right? Then there's a whole conversation around interest rates and if there's a cap allowed. And in payday lending, legally they're actually not allowed in Minnesota, but they operate currently through a loophole, and so in the policy. And so what we've been looking at is, okay, if we know this service is something that our membership uses, and we know that it's extractive and contradictory if we're trying to help build wealth, what would it look like to take that same service that folks are used to utilizing already and just turn it into something more equitable? So we can use this product less as a moneymaker, but more as a membership experience and building trust with this member. And so if we're able to create financial products and services that meet members where they're at, and then help them build to where they're trying to be, that's more of our intent with our products and services. And so in that sense, it's really looking at how do you build real relationships with community members so that folks actually feel comfortable telling you what are the products that they normally utilize or don't, and why? Because part of it could be around trauma, part of it could be around what family history has been like in utilizing financial services, and part of it could just be like which service is closer to you, right? And do you actually have access to do some of these quick loans on your phone, right? Like a lot of those are accessible via mobile devices. And so a lot of our how do we work with communities around building trust, creating products and services that make sense for where people are actually at, instead of like the one size fits all, here are the set products that we have and pick which one makes sense, but really trying to figure out for various subsets of our membership population, what can we do creatively to design a product, because that's something cool that we get to do, right? Like design our own products, and really push ourselves to be innovative in that way.
So will you be offering all of the services that most people think of when they think of a bank?
So yes, and we are planning on, when we first open, which our anticipated date is Juneteenth of this year, so June 19th. So it'll be a special day. We will have checking accounts, savings accounts, CDs, and a bunch of the different traditional services that you'll have. And our plan for sustainability is to ramp up to having more full-fledged services by the end of 2019. And so the idea is really trying to create access for an immediate need and do a lot of membership engagement within this first year and ongoing to really pull information from our members, asking about what are the products and services that you would actually want. And so right now, pre-credit union existing, we have this ongoing pledge campaign. So folks that are interested in becoming members take a non-binding pledge saying that when you open, will move X amount of money into a savings account or a checking account. And then we also ask questions around what kind of products and services you'd be interested in as a member. So we have a catalog of all of our pledged members saying, this is how many folks are really interested in car loans, and here's how many folks are really interested in home mortgages. So with that data, it's really helpful for us to be able to tier what products come out first, right? Because if we see that a lot of folks want car loans, then it doesn't make sense to start with home equity loans.
One of the things that strikes me as would be most exciting about getting involved with your group is somewhat of an opportunity to help to design the organization.
Yeah, definitely.
As far as voicing preferences,
Yes.
and then obviously working with someone like yourself. But that's not an opportunity that very many people get when they start thinking about how they're going to take care of their money.
Definitely.
So one of the other things that would be a concern if I was contemplating moving my money, is what kind of formal protections are in place?
Yeah.
So are say the deposits that somebody makes with your credit union, are they insured by the FDIC, say?
That's a great question. So credit unions are actually insured by NCUA, so the
Okay.
National Credit Union Administration. And so NCUA is the equivalent for credit unions of the FDIC. And so yes, our application got approved from the State Department of Commerce and now is with NCUA to get approval for insurance. And so those accounts, any member's account will be insured up to $250,000.
Okay.
Yes, which is if you go to any local bank, large or small, that's the normal amount of money that's insured, whether it's a credit union or a bank. And so we'll have that same type of protection for our members.
One of the things that I really like when I check out from a food co-op is when the person at the register asks me whether I'm a member owner.
Yeah.
And because I work all over the metro, I belong to quite a few food co-ops because that's where I like to buy lunch. Who can become a member of Village Financial?
Yeah, so we actually have a pretty broad membership. So it's anyone that lives, works, worships, or attends school in Hennepin or Ramsey County.
Could you repeat that one more time?
Yeah, so anyone that lives, works, worships, or attends school in Hennepin or Ramsey County.
So that covers a lot of folks.
Lots of folks, yes.
Now, you talked about earlier pledging.
Yes.
Could you explain that a little bit more, what that means?
Yeah, definitely. And so it's really helpful for us around not only gathering data from our potential members, saying that these are products and services I'm interested in, here's how much money that I'm thinking of putting into an account, right, which is helpful for our business plan. So we get a lot of that data up front, but then it's also a way that you stay engaged. So after you pledge, and again, this is non-binding, it can be found on our website. After you pledge, it's a simple form. We add you to our newsletter list so you can stay updated, and then we have post-pledging, we encourage folks to attend a monthly ambassador orientation. So if you want to learn more about like our theory of change, the way that we develop our products and services, and then other ways to get involved with helping to co-create the credit union, we have them every fourth Saturday of the month from 10 to 11:30.
So I have my own business, and almost every small business owner I know is a connoisseur of customer service, or in the case of credit unions, your credit union, member services.
Yep.
One of the things that really caught my eye when I was looking at the brochure for your organization is at the end of the application for a loan, it says you either get approved or you get a plan.
Yeah.
What kind of loans can people apply for? What products are you anticipating first offering as far as loans? You mentioned smaller loans. What other kinds of loans will people be able to apply for?
Yeah, so we're looking at bringing back the New Day loan, which is the small dollar consumer loan that I mentioned. We're looking at some small dollar consumer loans more so, and then really trying to look at the pledge data to see whether, again, it makes sense to offer lines of credit immediately or whether it makes sense to do car loans. And really all of this is dictated on those member pledges that we're getting. And so we like to think that we're a really smart group of folks that are doing this work, but a lot of what we offer is based on what our members are telling us that they actually want Juneteenth when we first open. And so a lot of what we found from our pledged members is that a lot of folks are just ready to move their money, right? And so it's interesting that it's more of, I want to get my money out of this bank, or I never really liked this space, but I had no reason to move my money. That folks are really just excited to literally transfer over their regular use accounts. And so, which is helpful for us because that gives us some more time to work on
quite a
those
vote
products.
of confidence.
Yeah,
Quite a
definitely.
vote of confidence. That must be inspiring. I understand that Village Financial and Mississippi Market are teaming up for an event in February. Could you tell me more?
Yeah, definitely. So it's going to be on their East Side store off 7th. And the idea is that we've been having these, part of our work as a financial institution is we recognize that we really are in this cool space to be able to, I guess, like, act as like fertilizer for the soil around creating a cooperative economy on the north side of Minneapolis. And so our focus is really on financial access and economic empowerment and helping to build cooperation. But there's also this other thread of what does it look like to help co-create and cultivate a cooperative economy. And so we have the largest conglomerate of food co-ops in a given area here in the Twin Cities. And we've been partnering with Seward, Wedge, and now Mississippi Market to really have these conversations around what does it look like to create a cooperative economy. A lot of folks are members, like you mentioned, at various food co-ops, and just think of it as access to organic foods when our food co-ops, especially here in the Twin Cities, have a really deep history around equity. And Village mirroring that with our equity and what we like to call like financial reparations work is really around how do we bring that conversation, that this like grandiose idea that our institutions are rooted in, to a more public platform so that folks are starting to more so identify with a financial institution that can also be radical in wanting to shape the community. And food co-ops that have been here for a long time also understanding that this is part of their legacy, and that making sure that their members and their workers are not only aware of that, but are aware of other ways to be cooperators.
Now, if I'm sitting here and I'm watching this show and I've heard about this event that's going to happen, and I'm sitting here and I'm wondering, should I attend that? And I say to myself, but I don't have $100,000 to deposit with these fine folks. I've only got a few $100s.
Yeah.
Am I wasting my time to attend this session? Or no matter how small the pledge, a pledge is a pledge and welcome?
Yes, definitely. So, I mean, my answer would be twofold. So, one, just to be a member of any credit union, it doesn't matter whether you have the $5 or the $10 or if you have thousands of dollars in your account, right? It's still, the thing that matters is that you're a member that has paid their membership due, and now you have stake in this institution. And so when it comes to the event itself, I think even if you're not quite sure about even the connection between food and finance, this will be a really great conversation to be a part of. That's also interactive. And so there's so much synergy around access generally, whether it's food, education, healthcare. And so we're really looking at how do we have a real conversation around access with food and finance and how those two play a part in the communities that we see today.
Where can I go right now in terms of social media to learn more about Village Financial? Where do I go on Facebook? Where do I go on the web?
Yeah, so our website is villagefinancial.org. And so you'll see, you can sign up for a newsletter. You could contact us to get in contact like more directly. There's the pledge form online under Get Involved. And our social media handles are all Village Fin, Fin, Co-op. And so Twitter, Facebook, if you type in Village Financial Cooperative, it'll pop up. Instagram.
Well, Shiranthi, thank you for being my guest on today's forum.
Thank you.
You can post comments, questions, suggest topics or guests for future shows on the Affirming Flame Facebook page. That's the Affirming Flame. Thank you for joining us today. I hope you'll contact Village Financial. I'm Kel Heyl.